because it's a larger audience. Okay, it's recording. Again, thanks to everyone for being here. Thanks for those people in what I like to call the Pine Tree Militia for doing all the work and putting this together. And I will say, for our part of this city, and certainly for our streets and roads, this is the single most important election of the commissioner and mayor's race. This is it. This is the single most important race. So it's important that you watch this and you speak to your neighbors and people across the street and friends on other streets, and you let them know what your thoughts and opinions are, and you try and get as many people to vote for the candidate that you think is best for Pine Tree. So with that, we're going to start with Rich Walker, candidate for mayor for the city of Parkland. And Rich, can you just give a very brief introduction of who you are, and then we'll get into the questioning.
Okay, so I will try to be brief. So anyway, my name is Rich Walker. I'm a husband, father. I have 5 children. My youngest is 6, and my oldest is 16. So I have 6, 10, 12-year-old boys, and then I have a 14-year-old and a 16-year-old girls. My children go to Park Trails, West Glades, and Stoneman Douglas. So obviously I'm very involved in the community. I'm in the schools. My kids play sports. I own my own sign manufacturing company, which I've owned for 25 years. We have an office here in New Jersey, or here in Florida, and we also have one in New Jersey. We're a national company, so we'll manufacture here in Florida, and we'll ship out, throughout the country. And I've been a commissioner now for 2 years. And, when Christine left, I saw this as an opportunity for me to run for mayor, because this next mayor's race has the opportunity to be the mayor for the next 10 years. And 10 years is a really long time. So it gives this next mayor a big opportunity to make sure, Parkland, everything that happens in Parkland is for the right reasons, and it's for all the residents, and it's going to affect me, obviously having a 6-year-old, someone who's going to be here for the next 20 years. Every decision that's made, good or bad, will directly impact, obviously me and my family, but most importantly, the residents of Parkland.
Thanks, Rich.
Yep.
I'm going to give just a very brief perspective of what Pine Tree feels about the ownership of the roads, and it's complex, and everyone's heard this before, but this is kind of our position on that. And that's, in 1966, the original developer of Pine Tree created an easement for roads and utilities. It runs 25 feet from the center of the road into everyone's property. In paragraph 3 of that easement, it said that the property owners were financially responsible for the roads on a pro rata basis. But in paragraph 11 of that easement, it said that the property owners are no longer financially responsible for the roads if the city takes over the roads. In 1975, there was a quitclaim deed from the developer of Pine Tree of that road easement, which is called a dedication, to the city. And in 1976, in resolution 76-10, the city of Parkland declared it was in the best public interest if the city took control of the roads. And the city of Parkland accepted the dedication of the road easement and declared the roads public. For those, I've heard a lot of funny explanations about the city owns the pavement and we own what's under the pavement, and none of that is quite accurate, although it is a way to describe it. Essentially, an easement is an ownership privilege to use land that is owned by another. With an easement, the owner of land, and we do own to the center of the road, the owner of land agrees to refrain from freely using or doing things on that land so that they may benefit another to use the land instead of the owner. And that's what we have here with the roads in Pine Tree. We own the land, but the city owns the easement. So we forego the right to use that land to benefit the city. And not really a question. That's just,
Well, you forgo to use that land. It does benefit the city. You forgo to use that land to benefit yourselves.
right. And we pay property taxes on it for 40 years.
Correct.
Yes, you
Yes.
understand that.
Yes.
So what I want to do is just briefly go over kind of the historical part of Pine Tree, and Pine Tree is really a historical epicenter of Parkland. Originally it was Pine Tree Estates and the ranches. That was Parkland. And you can still come down our streets, as a lot of people do that don't live in Pine Tree.
Yep.
And you can see the small, kind of small town, old school Parkland, right next to some big, fancy new school Parkland homes side by side on our streets in Pine Tree Estates.
Sorry, my dog.
It's okay. We've got two, and a hamster and a bird and a cat. So
Mine barks a lot.
coming. So in Pine Tree Estates, that's how we found out we wanted to live here. My family lived in Heron Bay, and we would just come driving through the streets to see the uniqueness and kind of the rural culture of Pine Tree. So I'd like to know, what are your connections to Pine Tree Estates, and what role do you think that Pine Tree Estates plays in the current day version of the city of Parkland?
Yeah. So, I mean, Pine Tree is, it's the original part of Parkland. I ride my bikes, I ride my bike through all of Parkland, but I love riding through the ranches. I love riding through Pine Tree Estates. When I grew up across the street from a farm. I used to walk across the street, pick my pumpkins, pick corn, whatever it was. Me and my brother, we'd go on hikes and just, we would walk, for hours. And we probably didn't walk that far because we were, 9, 10, maybe 11 years old. So it probably wasn't as far as we thought it was. But that's one of the things that I love about Pine Tree. That whole area of Parkland, it's got that feel that's just, natural. There's a lot of walking trails, there's horses. It's a wonderful place to be. And I can understand why the residents chose to live there. And, it's a main entrance into Parkland. If you come in from Coconut Creek or Boca or whatever, you're driving down Holmberg. Pine Tree Estates is one of the first developments. Yeah, I don't want to necessarily call it a development, but it's the first roads that you see driving down those, driving down the roads. And when you're driving down Holmberg, you can see, what has happened to the roads over the years. And for me as a Parkland resident, that's hard to see. And it's difficult to witness, because it's not what we would consider Parkland-esque.
So the next question, Rich, and this is going to show you how unsophisticated I am from a technology standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually going to start by playing a recording that I have on my phone from a workshop in 2018 from the Parkland City Commission. And the first person speaking is the city attorney, Andrew Morotis, and I believe the second person speaking is Ken Cutler. And they're talking about the roads in Parkland. Then I'm going to give you a little bit of a backstory, and I'm going to ask you a question. So hopefully you can hear this. I was told that it'll play. So tell me if you can hear it.
They look like public roads. They're used like public roads, and that's an important factor to understand.
So we talked about safety issues too. I mean, right now those roads are not safe. I mean, they're the kinds of deterioration that appear on those roads are probably more unsafe than the scenario that Bob's painting with, fixing the roads and making it a speedway. It is something that really needs to be addressed.
So that's Andy and I believe Ken. So my question is, and I start with a backstory. I've got two kids, a 6-year-old, like your youngest, and a 9-year-old, and their birthdays are 11 days apart, May 23rd and June 3rd. And during the pandemic, it was their birthday. And I, like many other parents, I'm not original. I copied what a lot of people were doing, and the birthday parades were a big thing. So I called BSO, and I contacted the fire department to see if they could lead a birthday parade, because what 5 turning 6-year-old boy wouldn't want to see a patrol car and a fire truck. And I was told by the fire department that they cannot do it. The police department did it, and they were great. They were fantastic. The fire department said they can't do it because they don't drive down the roads of Pine Tree Estates unless they absolutely have to. Because fire department vehicles either can or have been damaged on the roads because of the condition of the roads in Pine Tree, and that they must drive extremely slow down our roads, and that if they do get a patient on the way out, they have to drive even slower on the way out. And to me, that is a safety issue, and that is a response time issue. And I think that's an issue that's not only a concern for Pine Tree, but people have parties and gatherings and get-togethers, and you can have people in Pine Tree from all over Parkland and other cities as well. So I'm curious, both that recording that you heard and my question, how does that make you feel?
So our number one goal and our number one focus as a commission is safety. Nothing else really matters if we're not keeping our residents safe. And, you know, to hear that story, to see those roads, I mean, I've ridden my bike down every single road in Pine Tree to make sure I understand everything that everyone is talking about. And again, safety, you cannot stress enough how important safety is. To me, it's very disappointing to hear that story. And from a commission perspective, we need to make sure our residents are safe. And if our fire department is telling us that they can't drive down those roads for a birthday parade, to me, that's an issue. And that's something that absolutely positively needs to be corrected.
Well, I know I've seen it, that you're biking up and down these roads, and not to say you don't need a helmet on all the streets, but when you bike down 74th, I hope you have helmets on, because
I have notes on every single road. I have plenty of pictures. You know, one of the things that I always do, whether it's as a commissioner or as a coach or as a business person, the first thing I want to do is I want to know as much as I possibly can about everything, whether it's Pine Tree, you know, Heron Bay, whatever it is. I want to know as much, if not more, than the residents, because I'm a better leader, a better servant, the more I know. And I've made it a point to make sure I understand exactly what you guys are going through. I've spoken to several residents. I mean, I almost feel at home. I see a lot of names here that I absolutely recognize and that I know we've had conversations, that I'm friends with. That's important to me. And, you know, it's hard to hear stories that these safety issues are not and were not addressed. And that will absolutely not happen under my watch.
So we're going to get into some much shorter questions, and they're going to be some fairly hard-hitting questions.
Yep.
And I want everybody to understand that there is a group of Pine Tree Estate residents, I think it's maybe even 200 plus now, that unfortunately had no option but to sue the city of Parkland over this.
Right.
We did not sue Rich Walker. We did not sue Stacy Kagan. You two are commissioners.
Right.
But I do understand that you are privy to conversations with counsel in that lawsuit and counsel, the attorney for the city. And I do not want to tread over that attorney-client privilege and ask you things that were told to you by your legal counsel. So I've tried to do the best I can in drafting these questions and being a lawyer for 20 plus years to stay away from those areas. And I don't want you to feel as if I'm asking you anything that was told to you by an attorney, because I'm not.
Right.
But you know, some of these questions could be uncomfortable, and they're going to be fairly hard hitting for those of us out in Pine Tree.
Right.
So let's say on November 3rd, you win the election and you're mayor.
Yep.
You still plan to utilize Florida Statute 95-361 subsection 2 and the city's maintenance and taking plan to take title to the roads that we currently own?
Absolutely not. And that's it's absolutely not. To me, it's your property. You've been paying taxes on that land for 40 plus years, and that's the way it should stay.
And obviously it answers the question, but we have so many notes and minutes and recordings from city commission meetings where there's just misinformation. If the city actually did do that and took title, I want everybody to understand that changes property dimensions in Pine Tree Estates, and people are losing square footage And reducing square footage on lots reduces property taxes for the city, because the city's not receiving the same tax dollars because we no longer own that road. And you may say, hey, look, for my street, you know, what's the big deal? It's a 9-foot section by, I don't even know what it is, 100 and some odd feet. But remember, there's, I think, 773 lots in Pine Tree. So if you multiply that out and extrapolate that number out, it becomes a considerable number. So
No, and I just want to interject just a little bit there, Todd. That's one of the things that's a misconception with the other parts of Parkland. And I've made a point to make sure I'm talking to other residents and trying to get them to understand a little bit about what's going on. And I'm trying to make it as simple as possible. And that is the fact that you pay to the yellow line. So you are paying property taxes, you know, up to the yellow line. So you're paying property taxes on that portion of the road. And I've spent, you know, a lot of these driveway events, a lot of things that I'm doing, I am spending the time and making sure I'm talking to other residents so that they can also understand the situation that you guys are in and have been in for 40 years. You know, obviously 40 years, you probably only needed the roads, what, the last 30, which is horrible. You know, but that's something that other residents don't, there's a lot of people who don't know. I mean, think about the people who moved into Mir-a-Lago, Cascada, Parkland Bay. They don't know this issue at all. And if they're explained exactly what is going on, they can understand what you're going through. And that's what's been an issue for several years. Nobody's had, I don't want to say nobody's had the courage because I don't want to.
no, that's a fair statement.
Every commissioner and every mayor and everybody who's been there, and there's been other people who do speak up about it. But it's tough to say, you know, when you have an HOA, it's a tough conversation to have with them and say, well, you know, their thought process is, well, we pay HOA fees, so why should we pay for their roads? But it's more than that. You're paying property taxes up to the yellow line, which is more than I pay in my HOA. So I understand that. And this has been going on for far too long. And it's been brought up before. You know, this isn't the first time it's been brought up, but I can assure you, if I am elected, I'm elected on a 2-year term. The way that I look at things is a little bit differently. I need to try to get as much accomplished in those 2 years as possible. I mean, that's my goal. I don't look at it to try to get reelected 2 years after that, 4 years after that. I look at each term individually. I have 2 years. I need to try to get as much accomplished positively for the city as possible, because that will make me feel successful and that will make my family, you know, proud of me. And that is what this all boils down to for me, is trying to accomplish as much as I possibly can within my first 2 years. And this will absolutely be something high on my priority list to make sure we get something done finally for the residents of Pine Tree.
And I want to just give a little backstory to that. Traditionally, the mayor's term is a 4-year term. But because our current mayor left her term early to seek a seat in the Florida House of Representatives, and there's 2 years left, whoever wins the mayor's race will get to finish off the 2 years that remain on this term. And then you will have the opportunity to be elected to 2 full terms after that. So you really are looking at a 2-year term initially, and then it could be a 4-year term after that, and a 4-year term. So I want everybody to understand that when we're electing a mayor here, we're really electing a mayor for half the term that we normally would, because the current mayor left the position early. Rich, the next question, and I can talk, so this is about the shortest question I can ask. Who's paying for the roads?
Yeah, so like I said earlier, Pine Tree Estates has paid property taxes on the roads for the last 40 years. So the city has an obligation to pay for the roads. I mean, it's, you know, to me, it's something that needs to be done. and it needs to be done sooner rather than later. And it's not something that I'm willing to wait on. This issue has, look, as a newer commissioner, I came in when I was elected, and I had a few things that that made me want to run. And I feel like, come tomorrow, once the budget is approved, I'll have accomplished a lot of the things, if not all of the things that I set out to do in my first year, second year. If I'm elected mayor, I'm going to look at this 100% solely as a 2-year term. Hopefully hopefully I win and hopefully I'm reelected, but I don't look at it that way. I need to make sure I get as much done in my first 2 years as possible. And if I accomplish my goals, I'll most certainly get reelected.
So how do we pay for it? I know you say the city's doing it, but how do you finance it? Where does the money come from?
So those are obviously discussions that we'll need to have, how, whether it's a phased process, whether it's a bond. I know I've spoken a couple times to NSID, and there's opportunities for, which I don't really want to get into because, we could do city water, we could do sewer, but look, the focus is about getting the roads done. So I don't want to taint the project into something more or something less. Our main objective is get the roads fixed, and exactly how it gets paid for, the city has budget, it's got funds to pay. Where those funds, what project gets, maybe put off, what gets cut, what gets done. Again, I don't foresee this being a project that would get finished next year, but we certainly set the wheels in motion. Maybe we do 3 streets, 4 streets, whatever it is, in this year, those are the type of decisions that we'll have to make going forward, because capital expenditures, and sometimes speaking bluntly gets me in trouble, but we're not going to be able to do all the roads in 1 year. That's not even an option. So I'm not going to pretend that that's something that we can do. So it's going to be a phased approach, and it's going to be something that will take a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, whatever. But that's definitely something I'm willing to fight for the next, however long it takes. But once we get the project started, I don't foresee any opportunities for it to stall.
Yeah, I think most people understand that it's going to be a phased-in approach. You can't.
Right.
I don't know what we have 20 streets.
Well,
Yeah.
You never know, so I just want to make sure.
No. I think
I don't want to come in here saying, "Hey, Rich is telling us,"
we're knocking out 20 streets in a year.
Yeah, that's not my style. That's not the way that I am. I try to just be as transparent and open as possible, and that's what I'm doing here tonight.
So the next question I have, Rich, is how did we get to where we are between the city and Pine Tree Estates? And in your opinion, why are we here? How did we get here? What went wrong?
It's communication. It's 100% communication. Everything we do is about communication.
The dog's communicating.
Right. It's the neighbor's dogs. So city staff, we set policy, city staff makes some communication, but we haven't done enough. And I'll be honest. I mean, I've been a commissioner now for 2 years, and just over the past, 3-4 months, have I truly gotten involved in the communication process with Pine Tree residents, other residents. But it all boils down to communication. We need to do a better job speaking to the residents. We need to do a better job listening to the residents. And that's just something we've faltered on. I don't want to blame what's happened in the past. During my 2 years, our communication has not been what it should be. And that's absolutely something that I value, is my communication. I always listen. I always have an open mind. I will give you my opinion, but I'm not so set in my ways that says, nope, this is my opinion. I don't care what you say. I'm right, whatever. That's not me. I'll obviously have my opinions and my convictions, but I'm open-minded. If you give me an argument that makes sense, I'm all ears, and I'm more than happy and willing to, potentially change my mind, change my position.
Rich, can you maybe just explain for those that are watching some of the things that you've done personally to reach out to the Pine Tree Estates community, to listen to them about the issues and the roads, and maybe who else you've reached out to, other entities or organizations or persons, to try and craft some possible solutions? And obviously, when you approach this the first time, it's not just a here's what we're going to do. You really kind of get a broad array of potential fixes. So I think the people that are listening and those that are going to watch the recording would be interested to know, what have you done? Who have you reached out to?
I've reached out to several Pine Tree residents. I've reached out to non-Pine Tree residents because it's important, like I talked about before, it's important to give them my position. A lot of people ask, well, why do you think I should pay for somebody's roads? I just had a driveway event, the other night in the Landings, and their HOA person was like, well, why should I pay for their roads, when I am doing a road project now and we have to pay for our roads? And I explain it exactly, you guys are paying property taxes on your roads. This is something, and I remember seeing Leo. I see Leo over there. He came to one of my events and we talked to some of the residents there. People understand when you explain it to them, when you explain the situation, they understand. I don't want to say that's never been done, but maybe now because it's election season, I don't know exactly why, but people are starting to understand and they're sympathetic to what has been going on for the last, 30 or 40 years. And it's something for me, I have a hard time. This to me is a challenge that I'm happy to undertake because it's something that hasn't been done. It's taken so long to get it done. I would love to be the person who has gotten this fixed.
So Rich, I can tell you, I think why it's changed, and there's a lot of people that are muted in this meeting right now, and a lot of people that started a grassroots campaign in Pine Tree, kind of a decentralized communication zone in Parkland because we don't have an HOA. And this is not me. A lot of people got to work on starting a grassroots campaign, and we're basically just said, hey, Pine Tree Estates is tired of being an afterthought. We're tired of being treated as second-class citizens, and we're going to start moving to the forefront of the political agenda in Parkland like we once were. And I think, and I've spoken to a lot of people, lots of people outside of Pine Tree. And you're right, when you speak to people and you present them with the facts, although it is complex, I haven't had one person at the end of the conversation say, I don't want to use my tax dollars to pay for your roads. They have all come around. And that credit goes to a lot of people that are in this Zoom that started this grassroots campaign.
Yeah, no, I mean, everybody here has done a fantastic job. There's no question. You have all gotten the word out, to everybody else. And, you have some people who are willing to step up and say, yeah, to me, it's mind-boggling that it's gone on this long. And, I do understand to some degree, it's a hard decision and it might not be a popular decision. And maybe you won't be long for the political world if you make some of those decisions. But the bottom line is you got to make the right decisions. You got to make the right decisions for the entire city of Parkland, not just for this person or that community or that community. You need to make a decision that's best for all of Parkland. And Pine Tree Estates having good roads, having healthy roads, having safe roads is good for everybody because that makes your property values go up, which makes my property values go up, which makes the city's revenues go up. I mean, it's the more you do for the city, regardless of where it is, the better it is for the city as a whole. I mean, not the original reason, but one of my, things that I love is the parks. Not everybody uses the parks, but if we have a great park system, a great set of parks, that helps our property values. That makes more people want to move in. different families, whatever it is. Everything you do in the city that makes one home better makes all the homes better, and all of our property values go up. And that's really that's goal number 2. Goal number 1 is to keep everybody safe, and goal number 2 is to do the best we can to make property values rise.
So this is, again, my opinion, and I think it's shared with a number of people in Pine Tree, that for more than 15 years in Parkland, the decision to delay fixing the roads in Pine Tree Estates has been primarily a political decision and not one that was done with the best interest of the residents in mind. Commissioners were focused on championing their own individual political careers with press releases and speeches about lowered millage rates and property taxes, when in reality, when you talk in whole dollars, it was less than $100 in reductions. And when expenditures were approved, it was for fancy things like amphitheaters and artificial turf ball fields instead of infrastructure like roads in Pine Tree Estates. So the question I have is, are you willing to put an end to that politics and those delays? And are you willing to do what's right for Pine Tree Estates instead of worrying about who's going to show up to the polls and vote for you in 2 years in re-election when the mayor's race is up for re-election?
Yeah, so I'm fiscally conservative by nature, but sometimes cutting taxes, lowering the millage rate is not always the right answer. Because you need to make sure you have enough funds to do what you need to do. And it's not about millage rate, property tax cuts, or tax cuts, whatever. Should not be about re-election. You should be doing what's right for the city. And sometimes you have to spend money to make things better. And sometimes cutting the millage rate, to save, like you said, I certainly don't want to diminish, a savings of $100 or $80 a year, but a citywide perspective, that's $600,000 a year. So had we cut $500,000 every year since Pine Tree has been paying property taxes, we could have paid for the roads 3 times over. So that's something that I'm not necessarily, I won't do. I do what's best for the city. I'm not going to make a vote, whether it's to lower taxes, raise taxes, do roads, or whatever. I never look at getting re-election. My main focus is doing what's right for the residents of Parkland, period.
So what if the other commissioners that are elected wish to continue with the city's pre-existing plan to take our streets, take title to our streets, and then specially assess only the Pine Tree Estate residents to rebuild those streets? Will you be courageous and strong enough as mayor for the city of Parkland to stand your ground, even if it means that they get together and threaten to block your initiatives in your first 2 years?
Absolutely. You always have to do what's right. It's not, again, I will always do what's right. But I believe proper communication and the right arguments will make people see what should be done. And those are things that I believe I can absolutely accomplish as mayor. And I feel confident that if I am elected, this will be a problem that we will 100% get solved.
So when it comes time to vote on a solution to the Pine Tree Estates issue, I think everybody in Pine Tree would like you to understand that if you are the mayor, that we will be there. And we will be there to remind you of the words and promises that you made to Pine Tree tonight. And in 2 years, when you are up for re-election, if you did not follow through on the words and the promises that you made tonight, we will be there as well. This is a very short term for a mayor. It's only a 2-year term. And I think we want you to understand that we're going to be there when it's time to vote, and we will be there again in 2 years if things that were said and promised tonight weren't done. How does that make you feel?
That actually makes me feel good, because I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And I'm looking at this as a 2-year term. And I expect to get things accomplished. And if I don't, I expect to be held accountable. And those are the words that I do appreciate, because I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do what I say. And if I don't, I expect you to do exactly what you just said. But when I do, I expect you all to be out there voting for me again when I'm back up for re-election.
So I want to talk a little bit about the Heron Bay Golf Course. I lived in Heron Bay for almost 8 years. I've been in Pine Tree for about 1.5 years. And the Heron Bay Golf Course is not a pressing issue in East Parkland. It's not a life-changing issue in Pine Tree Estates. But in all of the residents of Pine Tree that I've spoken to, I think everybody recognizes that that golf course in Heron Bay is a citywide issue. And I think people understand that there's a good chance that there's going to be city resources and potentially city tax dollars that are used in some capacity to create a solution for that golf course. And like I said, everyone in Pine Tree I've spoken to supports that initiative.
Yep.
Why should that philosophy be any different as it relates to the Pine Tree roads, an issue that long predates the golf course issue in Heron Bay?
No, it shouldn't. Again, we're one community, and what's good for Heron Bay is good for Pine Tree. What's good for the ranches is good for Parkland Isles. I look forward to every issue. Those are how you can bring communities together. Right now I feel a lot of tension between Pine Tree residents, the ranches, Miralago, Cascada. Those are things that we should not be having in a small community like ours. We should be together, focusing on the same goals, looking to accomplish the same things. And that's exactly how I have always been. As the owner of my company, as the father of my children, I've always wanted to try to keep everyone together and keep everyone headed in the same direction. And that's exactly what I plan to do with this particular situation here in Pine Tree.
So we'll take a little bit of a turn away from some Pine Tree issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll ask some questions that maybe are a little bit more Parkland holistic and not so much Pine Tree. And I don't know how much
everybody's leaving
are aware. I'm sorry, Rich, I didn't hear you.
No. I just said everybody's logging off now.
Yeah, probably. But there was a resolution that Mayor Hunchofsky put forward that's been called the Buy Local resolution.
Right.
And I'm probably going to summarize it not 100%, but it basically said that when the city of Parkland is spending tax dollars to host anything, that they should at least make an effort to spend those dollars from a Parkland business first. And if you can't do it with a Parkland business, then go elsewhere. But at least you should look to spend that money with a Parkland business first. And I know you voted in favor of that, and your opponent, Stacy Kagan, voted against that Buy Local resolution.
Right.
So why did you vote in favor, and why do you think it was important to vote in favor of that?
Yeah, so I'm not a big fan of additional regulation, but we have to help our businesses within Parkland. I'm a Parkland resident, and I own a business outside of Parkland, but I would expect my tax dollars to be used on the businesses within Parkland. When you're doing your hierarchy of which businesses are important, first is our Parkland businesses. Second should be any business owned by a Parkland resident. Third is other. So any tax dollars that I provide to our city should be spent first when given the opportunity to a Parkland owned business or within the city limits of Parkland. Because if our businesses do not succeed, that looks bad on our city. So we must protect our businesses, especially now. They're struggling right now, and they need all the help that they can get. And it was super important for me to vote for that.
So I want to discuss something that's in the budget. And my understanding is that the city of Parkland plans on spending roughly $2 million to fix sports fields at Pine Trails Park and Terramar. And these are fairly new fields. These fields are not old fields. I know you weren't on the commission when this was done, but essentially, so people understand, the back fields at Pine Trails Park, which are new, were not built properly. They're not crowned, which means water doesn't run off them. They didn't have the right material put in underneath, and they're not used very often because even in a light rain, those fields flood and they're unusable. And in Terramar, there were 2 multi-purpose fields that were fairly recently built. Again, I don't think, Rich, that you were on the commission when they were done.
No.
They were built too small. They're not regulation-sized soccer fields. They were built too small. So now the city is going to have to spend $2 million to fix basically fairly new sports fields at 2 different parks. I tell you what, Pine Tree would like $2 million to go into their roads.
Right.
Why are we here? Why are we spending $2 million to fix fields and parks that are essentially brand new?
And this is one of the reasons why I ran 2 years ago. Sometimes we need a new, fresh perspective, somebody who's got a different vision or somebody who's got a different look. Again, it goes back to communication. I'm not sure how we don't communicate with our local sports leagues to make sure what we're doing fits their dimensions. But those are things we didn't do. And now we have to go back and fix those mistakes. And we have to because we're not providing adequate services for our residents. And it goes back again, it's all communication. The same reason with Pine Tree Estates. It's all about communication. And that's one of the things that I believe is a little different from me than everyone else. I'm always out on the fields. I'm always at the businesses. I'm always at community events. I'm always reaching out to residents. I want you to come and speak to me. And if it's not me, it's my wife who's in the PTAs at the various schools. That's what it's all about. I am a liaison between the residents and city staff. And that is 100% how I see myself. It's my obligation to make sure I'm doing everything possible to come into contact with as many residents as possible so that I can hear your concerns and either bring them back to staff and get those corrected on a staff level or bring those up myself and get those fixed on a policy level, through the commission.
So, Rich, do you feel it's important to foster a relationship with the state politicians in Tallahassee? And if so, what have you done to do that?
Absolutely. You need to foster relationships with as many people as possible. I went up to Tallahassee for Broward Days, and I advocated for 2 different projects that we were looking to have done, one at Pine Tree and one at the canals by Turnbridge, both of which were about $100,000 we were looking for from the state. One of those we did get approved. Unfortunately, due to COVID, when the governor came in and slashed some things, we did lose that $100,000, but that's something we need to do more of. We have done some of that, but we haven't done enough of that. I also had the wonderful opportunity to talk to the subcommittee in support of Alyssa's law, which is a law that Lori Aldeff, when her daughter was killed in Stoneman Douglas, that she put forth through Florida, and it gives panic buttons in all the schoolrooms. And again, having children in school, I felt that was important, not just for my children, but for other children. So I had a wonderful opportunity to speak in front of that subcommittee, and ultimately Alyssa's law was passed.
So the next question is going to require a little bit of a backstory. And I apologize because I know people are tired of hearing my voice, but it's probably a year ago, Rich. Rich and I didn't know each other, and it's almost on the 1-year anniversary of this. And Rich was coaching a kindergarten flag football team. Anyone who does that deserves a medal. I was also coaching a kindergarten flag football team for my son. And there's a lightning detector system at Pine Trails Park. And it gives off a loud audible siren. And then there's a yellow flashing light for 15 minutes to let you know that there's a lightning warning and you shouldn't be on the fields. I was there early. I worked very close to the fields, and I heard the audible signal, and then it goes to this yellow flashing light. Well, all the parents showed up after the audible signal, and they were all over the fields. It's because you can't see the yellow flashing light. The only place you can see it was way out of the way of the football fields over by the building, which you literally had to walk around the park to go see. And Rich and I happened to be walking up to the fields together, and I mentioned it. I said, look, this was a lightning warning, and all these kids and parents are out there. And I don't know if you know, we had a lightning death in Parkland in the last 2 years. A woman out on Hendricks Farm was killed. Right. But Florida's the lightning capital of the world. So we had a discussion. I knew he was a city commissioner. He didn't know who I was. And I said, look, here's the problem. It's an audible signal for 10 seconds, followed by 15 minutes of a flashing light that nobody can see because there's not a light near these fields.
Right.
And that was it. We went our separate ways, and he coached his team and I coached my team. And I think it was within weeks, but Rich, you could probably put a time frame on it. Within weeks, there was a new lightning detector system in front of the football fields that had the yellow flashing light that every parent and coach could see from the football fields. And I didn't know Rich. We just were walking onto the fields together at that time. And I mentioned to him, I walked over the field and I saw it and I mentioned it to him, and I know he told me a story that he caught some flack to do it, but it was a safety issue. And that story never leaves me, Rich, because that's literally the beginning of a relationship between the two of us. That's our first conversation that we had.
Right.
So I want you to explain to the people why you did that and what you had to go through to get that done in such a quick turnaround time.
Yeah. So this is what I want to do. I want to make positive change. I want to affect positively the lives of all the Parkland residents. And it was, I actually was a little embarrassed that I didn't know that myself, Todd, because being on the field as much as I am, I'm like, I can't even believe it. You're 100% right. But a little before that, the city had changed their policy. They used to have the Rangers drive around and tell everybody, to get off the fields, but they stopped doing that to protect the Rangers, which makes all the sense in the world. But then we're leaving our children and our parents kind of out there a little bit. So I went to city staff and said, look, this is a safety issue. We got to get it done. It was less than $5,000 to do it. So it was really a minimal cost impact. But anybody who drives, past Pine Trails Park knows how many people are out there on a daily basis. So it was a big deal. I'm glad you brought it up, Todd, and I was happy to be able to get it done. And those are the things, that's what I want to do. Those are the things that make me, those are the things that make me feel happy. Those are the things that make me want to do more. The more that I can do, the more that I can do.
So I think there's 3 questions left, Rich. And I know we've talked a lot about Pine Tree, but maybe you can just give us a very kind of broad overview of some of the other things that you'd like to accomplish in this abbreviated 2-year term if you win the mayor's race.
Right. So obviously Pine Tree now is absolutely front and center. So I'm looking forward to tackling that issue and getting that rolling. We just spent just under $7 million for a 24 acres of land over on Hillsborough, which will be an additional park. We had owned 12 acres of land. We purchased an additional 24 acres. So that gives us a total of 36 acres. That is a park that I would have liked to have already seen finished. But, considering we built the wedge and we added so much population to the city of Parkland, we don't have enough, field space for our kids, for baseball fields, football fields, whether pickleball courts, bocce ball courts, whatever it is. So I want to help get the Parks Master Plan off the ground and get that running so that we can improve what we have, make better trails, add different services, for our residents. So that is 100% something that I want to do. And I want to make sure, that we get our businesses back up and running. They're definitely suffering. As you drive down 441, you see more for lease signs every day. And a business that's open or empty, I should say, is bad for all of us. And that's something we absolutely need to take care of. Those are 3 things I want to do. obviously safety and security is number one, so I don't want to ever gloss over that. You know, it's important to have the best police department, first responders, to make sure they're as highly trained as possible and they have all the equipment that they need. But there's other things that we need to do to make sure we're keeping Parkland moving in the right direction, making sure we keep our property values up, because ultimately that's what we need to do.
So Rich, it's probably our final two questions.
Okay.
Explain to us what makes you different than the other candidate running for mayor. What differentiates you two?
The biggest difference, in my opinion, is my engagement in the community. I always go back to having five children. My wife is very active. She's in the PTO. You know, she's a board member at MIPA, which is the Stoneman Douglas band. My two daughters play. They're in the color guard at Stoneman Douglas High School. My sons play every sport, whether it's tackle football, flag football, soccer, baseball, what have you. So we're out and about every single day. I'm out and about, whether it's at community events, you know, on the fields, at businesses. I want to hear what you have to say, and I want to get things done. I look at every term that I have. How much can I get done in those 2 years? I don't look for reelection. If I'm not successful in mayor, I've been successful in my first 2 years as commissioner. I've got a lot of things accomplished that needed to be done to make Parkland a better place for more residents. I intend to do that when I win, and I have 2 more years. I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to work as hard as I can for the first 2 years to try to get as much accomplished as possible, so that I'm reelected because of what I've done, not for any other reason.
So Rich, this brings us to the end. I thank you, and I just want to give you one last opportunity to tell the people on this forum, and we're going to post these videos, the people that watch the videos, why they need to vote for you.
Yeah, no, again, I love Parkland. I've been involved in Parkland from the day we moved here 6 years ago, being on the soccer board, being on the baseball board, coaching my children. My wife immediately got involved again at the PTO, the PTA. This is another step for me to help the residents of Parkland. I'm going to live here for the next 20 years, and anything that happens, good or bad, directly impacts me and my family. And that's something that's on a negative side, that to me is not acceptable. And we need to do everything we can to get problems solved. And, you know, as a business owner, I look at things a little bit differently. I know how to work budgets. I've worked with federal, state, local governments. I understand how they work. I speak their jargon. You know, whether it's general contractors, landscapers, electricians, I understand a little bit more than most people on that realm, just because of my, you know, business background. And I'm very focused on getting things done. That is my focus. My focus is not on election, you know, or re-election. My focus is on trying to get as much done as possible.
Hey, Rich.
That's it.
We appreciate it. I
Yes.
thank you for your time.
Thank you.
We are going to kick you out of the Zoom.
Okay.
Stacy's waiting.
Okay.
And we'll transition to the next candidate. Thanks again.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Stay safe,
right.
please.
Bye-bye.
I know we had a buffer built in, but we went way over.
Way
So
over.
if everyone's good, I'll just start with Stacy.
She's been waiting in the, okay, she's been patiently waiting in the waiting room.
Yes.
Here she comes.
Okay.
Okay, she made it. Wait, let me unmute you, Stacy. Hang on one sec. Okay, you need to, oh, where'd she go?
She's here. Oh, good.
All right, there's the
Hey,
box
Stacy.
move. Okay, you're good.
I am terribly sorry. In my line of work, I normally get paid by the word, and it shows in these forums. So I do apologize. We're going to give you, I've got a list of questions, and we're going to give you that same amount of time. We started a little bit late, and I take the blame for that. But thank you for waiting patiently and joining us.
No problem. Thank you for having me, and I appreciate you guys taking your time on a Tuesday night late to discuss things that are very important, I know, to all of you. So it's your meeting, and I'm happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay, Stacy, why don't you just introduce yourself to the Pine Tree residents that are in this forum and give them a little bit of background about who you are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Stacy Kagan. I've been a Parkland resident for a little over 16 years. I've worked in the community now for over 20. I'm married for 35 years to my husband, Richard, and we have a beautiful, amazing 31-year-old daughter that graduated from MSD. I'm originally from Queens, New York, and moved to Kendall when I was a young child, and back and forth quite a bit from Miami to New York. And then we decided to raise our family here in Parkland. And I have a long history in Parkland because I worked here for many years, and I started actually in the mortgage industry. And Parkland has been something that has been extremely important to me for many, many years. And then when I saw what was happening in the mortgage industry here in Parkland and in the South Florida area, I decided time to get out of the mortgage business. And I always wanted to be a business owner. So I decided to open my own insurance agency, which I owned until November of last year, which I sold. And I was a very successful insurance agent here in the community. I spent many years working with the residents here. And when we moved to Parkland, I said to my husband, the last place I want to live in Parkland is Heron Bay, because most of my clients lived in Heron Bay and in Parkland Isles. And I felt I wouldn't have any break from doing everything, but I was so involved with the community that I ended up moving to Heron Bay. And my history in Parkland really started a very, very long time ago. So I've been a mom, a volunteer, a teacher. I used to teach preschool and kindergarten in my younger years. I also own a music school in Boca, and I'm very, very proud of that music school. But some of the things that I'm really proud of that I wanted to share with you is I wanted you to know a little bit about my history, because I really feel like I have been on the commission now almost 8 years. I've been vice mayor for 2, and that was during and right after the shooting. But what I'm proud of is my 8-year, I call it my resume, my history of what I've done in Parkland over the last 8 years and much longer. So when I first moved here, I was your typical mom. I was a volunteer. I volunteered at the high school. I got very actively involved, and I started off in the drama program because my daughter was very, very actively involved in drama and theater. She wasn't really a sports kid, but she was very involved in other things. And then through my activities with drama, I got even more involved with the high school, and I became a partner in education. And I'm very proud to say that I was Volunteer of the Year, and I brought a lot of really good programming and ideas to MSD and to a lot of the other schools. So then I started to get involved with the DECA program, and I don't know if any of you have any children that are in DECA or at MSD, but I feel that the DECA and Invest program are one of the absolute best programs that any child could ever have.
Stacy,
Yes.
I taught DECA at Plantation High School and was a top 10 DECA finalist when I was in high school.
Are you kidding?
I don't kid. I joke, but I don't kid.
Todd, that's so funny because
No,
I feel so
very
strongly about DECA that my kids that I've mentored all of these years, and that's going back, oh my gosh, 14, 15 years, they all stay in touch. Many of them are volunteering on my campaign for mayor, and they were all interns that I offered paid internships to. And what's so amazing about working with the kids is not only do they learn from you, but you learn from them. And they bring so many wonderful, insightful things to the table. And Todd, the program that they took to DECA States, DECA International, they won with X the Text, which is a program that I helped create with Allstate, with my daughter, and I've been teaching that program for years and helping children and adults learn to be safe on the road and give back to their community and talk about all of the things that they do. So I love that program. So I just want you to have a little bit of background about me. So a lot of the things that I am extremely proud of that I've done in the community on my job interview for the last 8 years is I voted on improving your parks, which we have the most amazing parks and we're going to have more to come. I voted on purchasing land for additional parks and also to prevent overdevelopment. I like to talk about the traffic lights because those are things that I fought for a long time. And I had my little camera and I took pictures because safety in this community is so important to me. So when I first became a commissioner, fighting for the light by Heron Bay and Nob Hill was crucial. And I got that done. And then every campaign promise that I've made, I kept. I used to be on the board of the YMCA prior to being a commissioner and back to my original days as an insurance agency. So the YMCA programs and bringing programming to our community for children of all ages, from our little ones to our young at heart, was very important. And I really felt that that was a need that we had in the community that we needed to address. And when I saw that the YMCA could no longer provide the services that we needed for our city, I voted and was very strong at encouraging my fellow commissioners to convert from the YMCA and bring it to the PREC. So I'm very proud of that as well. After and during the horrific shooting that we had, I don't know if any of you knew, but I actually lived at the Marriott Hotel because I had lost my house to Hurricane Irma. So when that happened and we had the shooting, it was a very horrific, challenging time for our community, for my family. But I will never forget that the day that the shooting happened and everybody was gathering, the Marriott was really the point where everybody from the community came and where our families of the tragedy were waiting to find out what happened. And I have to give a shout out to the Marriott with the way that they handled everything during the shooting and after the shooting and with all of the people coming and going. But I was at the hotel that night with the families till about 4 a.m. And when I was meeting with the families and talking with them, and we had politicians there, we had clergy there, we had the FBI there, we had police there, we had fire there. But the most important thing that happened that night was we had clergy there. And the clergy was there for the families and to be very protective of what was going on in our community. And I sat with the clergy and I said, our community is really going to need a great deal of help after this. And I really felt that it was so important that we brought our community together. So our families and the children and the teachers and all of the residents would have a place to go. So I sat down with the clergy, and that's the night that we came up with the vigil. And the night that we had the vigil, I got back to my hotel room at 4 a.m., cried myself to sleep after the experience that I had had with the family, because I had to be strong there. But once I got to my room, I let it all out. And then at 6 o'clock the next morning, I was at the PREC with my colleagues, with our city manager, with city staff. And I have to tell you that that day after the shooting, being there for the kids, being there for the teachers, for the families, was a life-changing experience for our entire community. And it showed the resilience, the strength, the compassion of what our community has and the type of people that we have. And because of the type of people that we have in our community, that makes me want to do more and be there and be available and give back. And for those of you who don't know a little bit about my history as a child, community is so important to me because I didn't have that growing up. I lived in, I don't know how many different places. I went to 12 different schools during my childhood, and I lost my dad at a very young age, and I've been working since I'm 12 years old. So I watched, I learned, I observed, and everything that I have and I'm so proud of, my husband and I really worked for. And giving back to our community and being part of a community is so important. And when I talk about community, I talk about an entire community, not just children, not just young adults, not just seniors. I look at every aspect because you have to. And you have to be able to relate and be open-minded and see things from so many different perspectives. When I became commissioner, I didn't have a child in the school system anymore. My daughter had already graduated. But what was so important to me was I never stopped giving back. I never stopped volunteering. I never stopped teaching DECA and insurance. And I continued everything that I've done, and I still continue to do all of the things that I've always done. So giving back to this community and being there for people is what makes me who I am. When I owned my insurance business, if a client got into an accident and they were close by or I was able to get there, I would stop what I was doing, grab food, grab water, make sure they were okay, go meet them if they needed to be driven back to their homes or taken to go get a car, I would do it. If a client had a claim at my office and it was their house, I would go to their house and I would do whatever I can to help them to deal with whatever they were going through. When I started my agency, I started and I was my first client. And I did so well and I helped so many people that I feel very fortunate and grateful that I was then put on the All-State Advisory Board, which I served on for 3 years, which was helping to make insurance better for people, helping our company to see what people needed for security and safety and protection for their lives and their family. And I also piloted safe driving and the X the Text program, which I've been teaching for years and will continue to do, even though I've sold my agency. And another thing that I'm incredibly proud of is I do own a music school, as I have shared in Boca, and we work a lot with our commissions, well, I'm very close with the commission in Boca. I've actually been endorsed by the mayor in Boca, Scott Singer, who is a dear friend and a wonderful mayor in Boca. But I'm very involved with the chamber, both in Parkland and in Boca, and a little bit still in Coral Springs, because I'm very involved with business to business and helping people to grow and encourage other people to fulfill their dreams. So there's a lot of things that I have done in our community, and I could go on and on because my list is incredibly long. But I hope that you have an opportunity to look at what I've done and examine a little bit more about me, and know that when I say something about my community, I do it. And when our community had problems with flooding and mold and excessive rain and everything that we needed to do and work on, I stepped up and I was there for the residents. And I'm very proud of the votes that I've made through the years. And I'm very proud of who I've been endorsed by for all of the work that I've done over the last 8 years and the relationships that I've made with people in Tallahassee and in Broward County and the school board and locally. And I don't know if you remember this, but a few years ago, they were threatening to take our children out of our Parkland school systems, because you are aware that, I think you all know, we have Broward County schools that are located in Parkland, but the school board wanted to bus our children out of Parkland, and we were at risk of our kids not being in schools that were located in Parkland. And let me tell you, I fought for that 22 classroom addition. I fought for extra classrooms at Heron Heights and at Park Trails. And the things that I have done nonstop consistently for our community are because I just have this innate desire to help and to mentor and to give back and to do whatever I can to make our community a very special and wonderful place. So there's so much. There's such a laundry list, and it's a really good one, from our farmers market to expanding our library to so many things. But I think I can weave in whatever else that would come to mind, but know that you can check anything that I voted on, and my goal is to keep our community levels strong, high, have our parks for our programs, have safety for our residents, to keep our property taxes low, and keep our values of our homes high, and get us through COVID and rebound on our future businesses and whatever needs to be done in our community to have the services that we need. So how's that for an intro?
Well, that covers it. I don't have any more questions. Thank you. Yes. Okay, so we'll get to some questions. Pine Tree is really a historical epicenter of Parkland. You can drive down our streets today and you can see kind of small town, old school Parkland right next to big fancy new school Parkland side by side on the streets of Pine Tree Estates. What are your connections to Pine Tree Estates, and what role do you think that Pine Tree Estates plays in the current day version of the city of Parkland?
Well, I love the question, and I think I shared this with you when we briefly spoke. One of the reasons that everybody moves to Parkland is because when they drive down Holmberg Road and they see Pine Tree Estates, they see the trees, they see the homes, they see how beautiful our entire community is, I really feel that it's an original. So I know that Pine Tree goes way back, close to 50 years. And I know that there are many residents that love the country feel, and there are many residents that like the modern feel. And I can also see the way that Pine Tree is changing. You have a lot of homes that have remained the way that they always were, and they might always stay that way. And then you have people that are coming in and they're expanding their homes and they're doing improvements. And I think that the Pine Tree community keeps Parkland in that very country feel. I will tell you that we even looked in Pine Tree when we were moving here 16 years ago, and there was like nothing for sale in Pine Tree. And I feel that with improving Pine Tree and with doing road work improvement, I do believe that it would enhance the community, and I do believe that it would enhance your homes, and I think it would make you feel a lot better being on your streets and on your roads. And I recognize that you're highly concerned about the safety and the roads and what will be for the future of Pine Tree and for Parkland.
So the next question I have, I'm going to start with some audio. And I gave the same speech for Rich, and I'm going to give the same speech for you.
Sure.
Obviously, there are 200 plus residents of Pine Tree that felt as if they had no other alternative than to sue the city of Parkland over the roads. It's not ideal. Nobody wishes that it happened. And obviously, we know that you as a commissioner and Rich Walker as commissioners, you are not parties to the lawsuit. You are not sued. Rich was not sued. We sued the city of Parkland. But we are aware that as commissioners that you have had conversations with attorneys and counsel representing the city over this issue. And I've got a lot of questions emailed into me. I've crafted my own questions. We're going to stay away from anything that was told to you by an attorney or counsel. I'm really only going to ask you your personal opinions and your beliefs. So when you hear my questions, and if you think it's uncomfortable because you think I'm asking what an attorney said, you just let me know that, and that's fine. But as an attorney myself for 20 years, I did my best to craft these questions away from anything that would have gotten to you through counsel. So I'm going to start with a recording that I'm going to play for you, and then I'll ask you a question. In the recording, it's from a city commission workshop in 2018. And I got this off the city of Parkland. Actually, I didn't. Someone got it. I'm not taking any credit. Off the city of Parkland website. And it's Andy Morotis, the city attorney, and Commissioner Ken Cutler talking about the Pine Tree roads? And then I'm going to follow it up with a question.
So they look like public roads, they're used like public roads, and that's an important factor to understand.
So we talked about safety issues too. I mean, right now those roads are not safe. I mean, the kinds of deterioration that appear on those roads are probably more unsafe than the scenario that Bob's painting with, you know, fixing the roads and making it a speedway. It is something that really needs to be addressed.
So during the pandemic, I have a 6-year-old and a 9-year-old, and during their birthdays are 11 days apart. And during the pandemic, my son was 5, turning 6. And I, being a completely unoriginal copycat parent, copied what everybody else did and tried to organize one of these birthday parades. And I called BSO and they were great and said, yep, we'll send a cruiser out or 2. And I called the fire department because I heard that the fire department was leading some birthday parades too. And what 5-year-old turning 6 wouldn't want to see a fire truck? And when I spoke to BSO, they told me no. They said that we are doing these, but we don't drive down the streets of Pine Tree Estates unless there is an absolute emergency. Because the condition of the roads, because we have damaged or our vehicles can be damaged as a result of the roads. And when we do go down your streets, we have to drive extremely slowly because of the condition of the roads. And if we get a patient, we have to drive even slower on the way out. That is an enormous, significant response time and safety issue, in my opinion. So how does that make you feel?
That's a very good question. It does not make me feel good. And I will tell you that I find it to be extremely disturbing. And I wish I would have known about that call, and I wish I would have been notified that they were not coming down your streets because of the parades, because that would obviously, as a commissioner who cares about their community and cares about children and wants everybody to have the same rights on what they should be able to have, it's definitely a concern. And I'm really curious, I would like to know, if you can you let me know who you spoke to in regards to that, Todd?
I've been asked, and as a parent, when you call, you know, I wasn't taking names or notes. I called BSO, they were great. I have been asked by other people. You're not the first one that question has been posed to. And I, you know, you call and they transfer you to the right department. They're not the right department. So I wish I knew. I don't. I'm sure the person that spoke didn't think that conversation was going to become part of a political forum question, but I wish I did. And they were very sweet about it. They were very nice. And it was just, we don't drive down your streets.
I'm taking notes on that. Do you know approximately what date that was?
No, but I can get that to you. My son's birthday is May 23rd. So, you know, it was
Right around there.
I'm a bit OCD, so I maybe get a little ahead of schedule stuff. So it would have been, you know, sometime in May.
Well, I think that's really unfortunate. I will tell you that I have gone on ride-alongs with both fire and police where I have been in Pine Tree, and I did not experience them not being able to access the roads. And it's not something that they have ever said to me, but it is something that I will actually have a discussion on, because yes, I am concerned about the roads, and yes, I am concerned about the safety, but I have never been told that there would be problems with police having access. Now, you can feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, because I like
police. Police, no problem. Said
fire, you're saying.
3 cruisers, they were great. Right, it was fire.
Okay, and you are aware your roads are 18 feet wide.
Oh yeah.
So how do you feel about the roads being 18 feet when the average road is 20?
I've been below average my whole life, so I don't have a problem.
I don't think you're below average. Don't do that.
I have no, listen, you can talk to other people. Part of Pine Tree is that the roads are 18 feet, you know? Part of what's great is I pull over for a neighbor, or, you know, the neighbor pulls over for me, or we bump side mirrors. That's Pine Tree. That's not something that we're complaining about. That's something that we embrace and that we cherish. And an 18 street foot is perfectly acceptable in a residential neighborhood. I lived in Heron Bay for 8 years. I know that community, and I had great experiences. We brought our son home from the hospital in that community. But that's something that I think I haven't heard from one person in Pine Tree that said, our streets are awful because they're 18 feet. It's what makes us different. What makes us Pine Tree. I mean, I think people like it and love it. And I'm not that get off my lawn when the car has to drive over my lawn because there's, you know, a garbage truck coming the other way. It's just what Pine Tree is.
Okay. I'm ready for the next one.
Okay. So if on November 3rd you're elected mayor, do you still plan on relying on Florida Statute 95-361 subsection 2 and the city's maintenance and taking plan to try and take title to the roads in Pine Tree Estates?
So I'm going to change one little format of what you said. When I become mayor on November 3rd, because I'm going to earn that vote and I'm going to earn the support of our community because of my experience and what I've done. And
No objection. When you're mayor on November 3rd.
when I'm mayor on November 3rd. But one thing that you will never hear from me, and I will not lie to you, I will not pretend what the truth is. I will not make you a promise that I cannot keep. And I will tell you that if I were a resident in Pine Tree, I would be extremely frustrated. I feel that what you've been going through has been going on for too long. And I quite frankly feel that it's a little embarrassing that it has been going on for the amount of time that it has. When I become mayor, and I'm saying when, because I will, my commitment to you is that I will give Pine Tree the importance that I feel that it deserves, and I do feel it is a very important issue. I will give you the platform and the podium to share how you feel and what your concerns are. I will give Pine Tree and the city an opportunity, if we can, to work this out prior to incurring any more fees and costs with lawyers and litigation. And I feel that if we work together collectively as a community, not only with Pine Tree, because I need to let you know that this is what I am hearing, this is not what I'm saying. So what I am hearing are residents from other parts of our community are very upset and very frustrated as well, because they're hearing rumors and innuendos that other people that are running for office are making promises to Pine Tree that they don't agree with. And I want you to know that that will make it harder going forward, because you have so many contrasting points of view. And my goal is to bring everybody together and have everybody work it out. Because if we look at it and we're solution focused and we take it as, let's say, a mutual gains approach. And what I mean by that is if we establish a level of trust and a level of mutual respect for one another and my fellow colleagues, because as you know, and I'm sure you've spoken to everybody and you've heard all of us speak, it takes 3 votes on that dais. We're each one vote as a commissioner, 1 vote as a mayor. It takes 3 votes to push anything through. And we don't know how the rest of the community is going to react. And I can tell you what I'm hearing. I'm hearing from my HOAs, and I'm not just talking about Heron Bay, I'm talking about people throughout the community that have been calling and saying, I hear that everybody who's running for office is making promises to Pine Tree. I'm not going to make you any promise.
They don't have public roads. They don't have public streets, and anybody can drive up and down whenever they want with no security gate. They don't pay property taxes to the center line of their streets. So to me, it's a different situation. And I'll leave you with a Steve Jobs quote. He said, to be a leader, you have to make difficult decisions. If you want to make everybody happy, sell ice cream.
I agree with that. And I have made many difficult decisions on the dais, and I will continue to make difficult decisions. but I will not promise you something that I can't deliver. But what I will promise you is within my first 2 years, my term, I promise you that I will give this the time, the commitment. I will work to resolve it and come up with a solution that could be a win-win for everybody in our community. And I will not sit here and promise you something that if anybody did promise you something, I'm sorry that you feel that way, but if anybody did promise you something, they have to get everybody else on that dais. And I don't know what the answer is going to be, but I do feel that it's very important that the representatives of Pine Tree get together and the representatives from our city get together and start having that open, candid discussion. Because what I can tell you is when we've had issues in the community and we have brought the community together, guess what we did? We solved it. I worked on solving it. But you can't solve it when everybody's fighting with each other. And you can't solve it when people are being negative towards one another. You have to solve it and you have to have an open mind and you have to find a way where everybody can come out and feel like they win. Do I feel the roads need to be repaired? 100%. Do I feel that they need to be actually taken down completely and rebuilt? Yes, I do. I don't feel that it's a patchwork job, but I do feel that we need to be solution focused. We need to have a positive attitude and we need to get it done. Exactly how? We'll work on that collectively starting on November 3rd. And we'll work on that with our new dais and our new commission. And I have had Pine Tree in almost every budget that I have voted on, with the exception of this year. And this year, we didn't have strategic planning. So because of not having strategic planning and the pandemic, a lot of these things that we were planning on discussing and coming up with solutions for, we didn't have that opportunity. So my request is that Pine Tree try to collectively get together, because I did speak to a lot of residents and I have driven down many of your streets and I have spoken to many people, and I still feel that your community still is not 100% on how they feel and what they want.
You'll never be. That's what's great about Pine Tree.
It does make you special and interesting.
If you want 100% consensus, go to
Not
a
100%.
It's not going to happen.
There's no such thing. No such thing as 100%.
So the next question I have is really a statement, and that's because sometimes when you don't get an answer, you actually did get an answer. So if the city takes title to the streets, and it's our position that we own to the center of the streets, but the city owns the easement that the roads are on. And what that means is the city owns the privilege to use land that we own. That means that we have agreed to refrain from freely using or doing something with our own property so the city of Parkland can benefit from our property. All the while, we've paid property taxes on this land for 40 years. When I say we, the homeowner before me, the homeowner before me. So if the city goes forward and takes title to the roads, do you understand that that changes property dimensions in Pine Tree Estates? It changes total square footage to each lot, and it reduces property taxes to the city because we're no longer paying taxes for that portion of our property that is the streets. And it may not seem like a whole lot at my house, 9 feet by, 100 and something feet long, but I think there's 773 properties. So if you extrapolate that out, it's a significant amount of money, and that's changing surveys, changing property dimensions, and less taxes for the city of Parkland because we're no longer paying taxes on that land.
Do you want to comment?
Yeah, I just want you to, I have recordings from meetings where those questions were brought up in 2018 and nobody knew the answer to that. Somebody said, well, we're just getting a right of way. No, you're not getting a right of way. You're getting the property. So sure, if you have a comment, great. If not, I can move on.
Okay, so I can't comment on that. I am listening to you and I do hear you. But on the advice of my city attorney, unfortunately, I cannot comment on that. And I know that it is very much being looked into, and that is.
That's okay. I told you that I would cover for you if you felt something kind of invaded the province of an attorney-client privilege. I'm going to take the full cover for you, and I am a man of my word, and I'm going to do that. And I don't want you to answer any question that you do not feel comfortable with.
Thank you, Tom.
And if that's how you feel about that question, I don't even want an answer. So,
But I do have a comment on one other portion that is kind of related to that. You also have a street in Pine Tree where you have the power lines, and FP&L owns that other side of the road.
I live on that street.
Oh, so you know about that street as well.
A little bit.
Yeah, so there's concern on that street because FP&L also owns one side of that street, and you know that you're having FP&L work done right now on some of your streets, and that was completely done through FP&L and by FP&L, and that was not something that was sanctioned by the city.
Yes, and every time there's a hurricane or a power outage, they use our street as a staging area for all the FP&L trucks, and miraculously, our street gets power back last. So yeah, familiar with that street. So
I know they're working on that though.
This is from me talking to people on my street that are original owners. We're a very unique street because we only have half the homes. So we've got a great street here. So I've got these stories from people that have lived on this street that built original homes on this street. I take no credit for this. It's just having conversations with people on this street. So Stacy, the next question I have is, you're elected mayor on November 3rd. Who's paying for the roads in Pine Tree Estates?
That's going to be a decision that's going to be made by the commission or by a judge or by a group of people that will have a platform that I would give for you, that you can get together, talk, communicate, come up with what you feel is your best solution. And it's something that I would be happy to jump on, help lead. But I really feel that it has to be a discussion that has to be collectively done with our entire commission. And it has to be done as well with the residents of Pine Tree and the residents throughout our community.
So maybe you can share with us some other potential solutions or ideas that you have to solve the Pine Tree Streets issue when you're elected mayor on November 3rd.
So I do have many ideas, and I do believe that it will eventually be a very fair solution, and it will be a compromise. And I cannot commit to how or who's going to pay for it, because this is a discussion that we have to have on the dais, and it's something that I really feel that we need community input from. And I think that the representatives that you would select from Pine Tree to speak on your behalf, whether it be you, Todd, or I see a lot of other active people that are within Pine Tree that have ideas on what they feel should happen. And then when we are all able to discuss it and vote on it, that's when you'll have your answer as to who pays. But I would like to share with you, and I know that you all did see this. So when the city manager sent the letter and the survey out, I just want you to have an idea of how I felt about that survey, because I felt it was very important to find out how the community feels. Because when I have to vote on something and I have to make a decision, I have to look at things not from my own personal perspective, but I look at it as an entire community, not just one development, or not just one area, or not just one person, but our entire community. So when this was sent out, I thought that this was a step in a positive direction, because I wanted to know how the residents felt, what they wanted to see. I wanted the city to give us an idea of what the costs were and what they were involved, because I've had people say, I want just roads, or I don't want anything, or I want to do my roads myself, or I want roads and water, but I don't want sewer, and don't touch this, and I don't want you on my property. And there's so many questions. And then I went back into City Hall and I started reading a lot of the surveys, and it was frustrating for me because, again, as Todd had shared, there was no consensus. However, what I didn't think was so horrible when I think about it was when they gave the estimated cost of what it would be per house to repair, or I don't want to repair them. I want them to be like new. I want them to be safe. I want them to be beautiful. I feel that by improving the roads, that you're going to increase the values of your homes. I think when people drive into the community, it's going to have more people that are going to be interested in moving into Pine Tree or buying in Pine Tree. And I have also spoken to many realtors, and I know how the realtors feel about the roads. And I also know that the property values in Pine Tree right now are going up, and that your average home that sells in Pine Tree is on the average over 600,000 to at least $1 million. And I know that your lots are selling for more as well. So when I think about it and I look at the numbers and I say to myself, okay, we're talking about an average of $700 a home per year to improve the roads. And when I look at that number and I say, okay, we're talking about $50 a month. And I live in an HOA, and with my HOA, I pay a lot more than $50 a month. And the way that the city manager laid it out and the way that our finance department did, I know where you're going, and I know you're saying there's no way that you feel you should have to pay for the roads. And I am not saying who should have to pay for the roads.
We've paid taxes for the roads for 40 years.
I know
Why
you
should we pay for them twice?
Yes. But I also know that when I look at an average of safety and improvements, and I say to myself, it's about $50 a month, and it's for safety and it's for improving my property values. I'm not talking about who's paying for it. I'm just talking about the money on hand. Per household, that's not a lot of money. Now it is, with everything that we're going through with the pandemic. And when we think about it over a course of an amount of time, and we say to ourselves, well, if I were fixing my own driveway or my own street in front of my house, it would probably be a lot less. But if I do it as a community and I do it through some form of the city, that it would have to be done at a much higher level in a very different way. So when I tell you that I'm looking at every aspect of it, I really am. But until my commission comes together, discusses it, votes on it, or until Pine Tree and Pine Tree's lawyers and our city's lawyers meet and talk, and we all collectively work together and communicate, I think that we will come up with a positive solution, but not amongst a lawsuit, and I don't believe in fighting on Facebook or being negative on social media. I believe that this is a real issue and a real concern. And yes, you have my attention. And my commitment is coming up with a solution, and coming up with a solution within my first 2 years as mayor. That's what I can give you.
It's our understanding that that letter that was sent out in March of 2020 was predicated on construction numbers from like 2012. Those numbers were almost 10 years old. And I want you to know how that letter felt to a lot of people in Pine Tree. That wasn't a letter. That was a Trojan horse notice provision that the city was going to take your property pursuant to this state statute. And when somebody spoke up after title to their property was taken and said, I didn't know you guys had a plan going on for 7 years to try and take our property, the city was going to pull out that survey and say, sure you did, here it is. You signed off on what you wanted and here's the date. That's just how we felt. I want you to know that. So it was based on 2012 numbers. To us, it was very threatening because it said, you know, hey, we're taking your property. We've been maintaining your roads for 7 years. If you've been down our roads, like you said that you have been, I think it's an utter embarrassment for someone to say that they've been maintaining these roads for 7 years. I wouldn't want my name on a project that included the condition of these roads if I had to say I was the one that was maintaining these roads. These roads are an abomination, okay? They are an embarrassment. And for someone to say, well, we've maintained them for 7 years, they're now our roads, it's almost laughable. And again, I just want you to know how we feel. I'm not trying to argue. I just want you to know how we feel, how we felt about that letter. And obviously your perspective was different, and how we feel about what was perceived as a threat to take property. You know, in the Old West, there were repercussions when you stole another man's horse or a woman's horse. And that's kind of how it felt that letter was. It was basically saying, you know, we're going to steal your horse. So we'll move on. Stacy, for the past 8 years, essentially, you've been on the city commission. And during that same exact time frame, the city has been engaged in a plan to document alleged maintenance on our Pine Tree streets so that they could take fee simple title to our property and then special assess us to rebuild the roads. And this is even though the roads were originally created as part of an easement, and the ownership of that easement was transferred to the city in 1975. And in 1976, the city entered into a resolution accepting the transfer of that easement. Why in the 8 years or so that you were on the commission was this plan never formally revealed to the owners of Pine Tree Estate property until March of 2020, which was 6 years and 11 months prior to the 7-year deadline?
I see it differently, and the way that I see it and the way that I have always felt about it is, and you might have even heard me talk about this, but this has been going on for almost 50 years. And I have said publicly that I don't want to kick the can down the road anymore. I want to come up with a solution. And I have said that.
Years to come up with a solution.
Yeah, I have said that many times, but I'm one vote and I'm one person. So it takes an entire team. And I was very, very serious about working on Pine Tree. And as you heard, there were other commissioners that were as well. And this year was the year for us to discuss it. And strategic planning did not happen. And there were many commissions prior to me and prior to them. And because there has always been such a question as to who owns the roads and who's responsible for the roads, I have to follow the advice of my city attorney. And that was always the question. And by doing the letter and by having discussion and open, candid conversation, I feel we would have come to a solution. There was even a time that, I don't remember if it was at strategic planning or at a commission meeting, that many of us volunteered to come into Pine Tree. Oh, sorry, my foot's caught. Come into Pine Tree and actually knock on the doors of the residents to have a conversation, because we never felt that we had communication. I never felt that I had communication. And there were many people that would come into chambers and hold up a sign and say, stay out of Pine Tree. So it's been a very confusing message for many of us. And the unfortunate part of all of this is I wish it didn't have to come to this point. And I really hope that we could come to a solution beginning right on November 3rd or at the very next meeting. However, I feel that it's something that we all have to work on together. And by saying we all have to work on it together, I really mean collectively, as a commission, as a city, as a community, because I am concerned about the roads and I am concerned about the safety. And I'm extremely disturbed about what Todd had shared with me earlier about the fire trucks. because that has never been brought to my attention at Pine Tree. And as I said to you, I've been on ride-alongs where it was not a problem getting into or turning around or a safety concern for the fire trucks. So that's another issue. But I do feel your frustration, and I'm embarrassed that it hasn't been done. But it doesn't only fall on me, and for the residents of the community to feel that it falls on me, I think is unfair. I think everybody needs to take a little bit of responsibility. And
Stacy, no one says it falls on you. I want you to understand that.
thank
We are
you.
not
I
blaming,
appreciate that.
but you are the one that is seeking to become the leader of this city.
Yes, I am.
Right.
Yes, and I feel very strongly about it. And I feel very, yes.
No one is blaming you, but you're asking for our vote to allow you to lead this city.
Yes.
To be the mayor. And you keep telling us that you need to wait for your commission. You should be the leader of that commission as the mayor. You should be the one that takes on the leadership role as the mayor. So we're not blaming you. We're trying to figure out, are you going to be the leader that we need for the next 2 years and potentially 6 years and potentially 10 years to finally, no pun intended, stop kicking this can down the road?
No, I appreciate the pun, and I welcome the pun. And I have a very thick skin, and I'm not insulted by in any way, but I will not mislead you, and I will not make you a promise that you want to hear that can't be delivered. But what I can tell you is, if you look at who leads the votes on the dais, and if you look at who brings things forward on the dais, you're looking at her right now. And I'm very proud of what I've done and what I've accomplished. And this is something that will be on the top of my radar to get resolved. But I cannot promise you how the vote can go, but I can promise you that I will lead it. And I will lead the charge, and I will lead on a solution. And if you don't like the way I lead and you don't like the solution I come up with, then exactly. I just saw the hands down, and I would give the hands down too. I might not have even been that nice. I might have even used a different portion of my hand. But I absolutely do understand your frustration, and I do recognize where you're coming from. And I will commit to working very hard on this, but I can't speak for my colleagues, and I can't do anything without being up there. And not only do I need to be up there, I want to know that not only do I have the trust and the faith of my community, I want my community, meaning you, the residents of Pine Tree, to be involved. And I want you to speak up for what you want. And I want Todd to continue to share his feelings and the feelings of the residents of Pine Tree. But if anybody has been on this call and has made you a promise, that's not right. And I won't do it. And that doesn't make me a bad leader. That makes me a true leader.
Stacy, look, I applaud you for agreeing to come do this forum, knowing that Pine Tree was upset, knowing that we galvanized 200 plus families and hired an attorney and sued the city, for knowing that Pine Tree was very unhappy. I do applaud you, okay? That's not an easy thing to step up and do. And I think it's courageous, and I applaud you for doing that. I may not applaud some of the answers I'm getting, or any of the answers I'm getting, but I applaud you for at least showing up and taking these questions and answering these questions. And it's a burning issue. It's something that has to get out there. We're asking all of the candidates this. So the next series of questions I have, excuse me, it involves a recording on the city website. It's from the August 1st, 2018 CCM workshop, which I believe stands for City Commission Meeting Workshop. Mm-hmm. And that recording is 3 hours, 8 minutes, and 20 seconds long. And out of that 3 hour, 8 minute, and 20 second recording, Pine Tree Estates is discussed for 18 minutes and 23 seconds. And I have that recording broken down on my phone, and I can play tidbits of it.
Sure.
Not all of it, but I can play tidbits of it. That's the beauty of the world we live in now. You can't hide from anything anymore.
I know.
So in that meeting, while the Pine Tree roads were being discussed, on seven different occasions, you recommended, suggested, and proposed to special assess the Pine Tree residents to rebuild our roads. 7 different times. In the same meeting, and I have the recording here, you asked if we can even widen the roads, widen them, and special assess the Pine Tree Estates residents. You also on 2 separate occasions asked, and I'm gonna quote, and I have this in the recording, imagine how residents are gonna feel that are in HOA communities when we fix roads we don't even own and we wouldn't even drive by. That's a quote. I have the recordings here.
For the older areas of Florida where you didn't even know who built the road. But if the city assumes custody of it and maintained it for that 7-year period, you could cure the ownership issue. So that was the decision that was made.
You can cure the ownership issue, but can you still special assess to have the residents pay for it?
There's one. I'm not going to play all of them because
That's okay.
I have them. You know I have the recording and they're on the city website. Here's the concern about what the HOA communities are going to think about what's going on in Pine Tree, which just boggles my mind because you do what's right for the reason that it's right, not because there are other people in other communities with private roads that people can't drive on unless they're invited are going to be concerned.
All right, and the other concern with this is if these are not roads that we own, and these roads are owned by individuals, and you have people that are living in HOAs, and these people are right. There's no HOA.
Right.
So when we live in an HOA, we're paying for our roads and our HOA through our homeowners fee.
Right.
So imagine how residents are going to feel that are in HOA communities, and we're paying for our roads, then to turn around and say, well, we're going to spend $3.9 million fixing roads that we don't own and we wouldn't drive by.
So on 7 different occasions, you inquired about special assessing the Pine Tree Estate homeowners for the roads. On numerous occasions, your priorities seem to be what are the people in the homeowners associations going to think if we do this. On one occasion, you actually asked if you can widen the roads
Yes.
and special assess the Pine Tree Estate homeowners. And in one instance, you asked the public works director why you weren't special assessing the Pine Tree Estate residents for the pothole repairs already. So I have 3 questions that come out of that recording. The first one is, why for the past 7 years have you supported the maintenance and taking plan for our streets and special assessing the Pine Tree Estate homeowners for that?
Well, I'm glad you asked, and I'm going to be very upfront and very honest. And people who live in HOAs have a very different belief than people who live in Pine Tree and people who live in the ranches. And people who live in HOAs feel very strongly that they pay their taxes and they pay for their roads to be taken care of. So a big part of this concern has been who owns the roads and who's responsible. From what I have been told since I have been a commissioner, and as you heard on the recording, is that the city did not own the roads, that the residents own the roads. Yes, I know you're paying taxes on the roads, but we also, and people in HOAs, also pay taxes and also pay an HOA fee. So this is something, as I said, and you heard me say before, we've been kicking this can for too long. So I hear you. I hear what you're saying. I am not going to commit either way because I see what your point is. But until we get together, involve other communities that have HOAs, because I'll give you an example. How do you feel when we do a park improvement? just think it. You don't have to answer it, but think about when we do a park improvement. Think about when we do lighting work. Think about when we increase landscaping. We do things for an entire city and an entire community. And I understand that you feel that the Pine Tree residents feel neglected and left out, and you feel that it's the city's responsibility to handle the roads. But there has been so much question since I've been a commissioner. You've had commissioners that have served on our dais that actually live in your community.
I know.
You've had prior commissioners who live in your community. You have commissioners before that who actually live in Pine Tree. So my question is, why wasn't it figured out back then? And I also want to let you know that the reason, and there were many of us that spoke about.
I'm not a fan of not coming up with a solution and instead pointing the finger backwards and blaming other people.
That's okay.
I'm not a fan of that. It's time for
That's
some.
okay. But this was another concern. For many years, we were told that the road, if it was going to be redone, that it had to come to the standard of 20 feet.
I have this recording Andy and the Public Works Director saying that in residential neighborhoods, that a 16-foot wide road is perfectly acceptable. That's in that same recording.
That might be in that recording, but I'm going even further back. So there was so much question between what size, who, where, water, sewer. And that's what came back to this. I know that you're hearing from other people that are not currently on my dais that they'll make things happen. And I know you're hearing from people on my dais that they're going to make things happen. And I will tell you, opinions change and thoughts change and people change. You don't have the same people that were living in Pine Tree 8 years ago that you have now. You don't have the same issues with the roads. Yes, they've always had a concern and they've always had an issue. But yes, there are issues on the roads. Am I concerned about the safety? Of course I am. And I am committed to doing something and doing something right. But again, Todd, I will not make you a promise I can't keep.
So the second part of that question was, why haven't you previously reached out to Pine Tree Estate property owners to let them know about that plan over the last 7 years, a plan that in 2018 you discussed on 7 separate occasions, recommended special assessing the Pine Tree Estate property owners for rebuilding the road, suggested special assessing Pine Tree Estate property owners for the pothole repairs. If anything, the city should pay us for the pothole repairs, or asking to widen the road and special assess the Pine Tree Estate property owners. Where were you those 7 years? Where were you reaching out to the Pine Tree Estate property owners, especially with an at-large commission seat, where although you represent District 1, you're voting for the entire city? And you may have been, and this is your opportunity to tell people where you were, where were your boots on the ground in Pine Tree, letting the Pine Tree residents know of this plan and what was going on and hearing from them.
Well, I do have to say my boots are always on the ground and I am always out in the community and I'm always talking to people. And I do know a lot of residents in Pine Tree and I have friends that are in Pine Tree and I have talked to many people in Pine Tree over the years. This is the difference. And this is how I see it. And this is how I feel our community functions. And this is what I feel is the right way to do things. So if somebody has an issue in my district, they know, they pick up the phone, they call me, and I jump on it like that. They have an issue, I respond on my phone. They send me an email, I respond. If it's a bigger issue and we need to get it rectified, I step in and I do it. One of my biggest problems that I personally have, and I'm sharing this openly with you, is I don't promote myself enough. I don't let people know what I do on a daily basis enough. Because I always felt that that was the role and the face for the mayor to do. I've served with 2 incredible mayors, Mayor Hunchofsky and Mayor Udine. And they both look at things differently, but they both, in my opinion, have done outstanding jobs. And I'm very proud to have served with both of them. As a commissioner, it's a respect level. So anybody who would ever call me that needed help, whether they lived in Pine Tree or Heron Bay or Parkland Golf and Country Club, when there's a problem, I step in. I have never gotten a direct call from a resident until recently about Pine Tree. And the way that we have always respected each other's seats and district is when you live in a certain area, you get to know your district. You get to know your commissioner. You get to know the needs of the area in which you live in. And then when there's an issue, we bring it forward on the dais. So if you look at, call any resident that I've ever worked with, look on any issue that I've ever had a concern with. And I have fought to bring that to my city to let everybody else on the dais know that this was an issue and a concern, and we need to come up with a solution for it. If other people in your district did not serve your community that way, that's the way they handled that district. And more information should have been brought forward, in my opinion, to everybody. So when there's an issue in Heron Bay, or there's an issue in the Wedge, or when I was representing Parkland Isles and Parkland Reserve and Cascada and Watercrest, when there was an issue, everybody on my dais knew it. And I made sure that I spoke about it. And when there's an issue in other parts of the community, I go based on the information that's provided to me from my colleagues, and I vote based on what I see and what I hear. As mayor, my role changes a little bit differently, because as mayor, I am all over my community and getting to know a lot more of the other areas in which we don't necessarily serve in. Even though we serve, hello, they're waving, I'm waving back. Nice to see you guys. And whoever does serve.
That's the beloved Robert Brannon.
I'm sorry?
I said, that's the beloved Robert Brannon waving.
I see, he's waving. So I feel very strongly that having a strong district commissioner is extremely important, because I count on my colleagues to bring information forward, and I think my colleagues count on me to do the same. So my role will be changing quite a bit as mayor, and I will have to lead a little bit differently, and I will have to look at things from a little bit different of a perspective.
So I want to talk a little bit about the Heron Bay Golf Course. Obviously, you live in Heron Bay. You let it be known you live right there on the golf course. My family lived in Heron Bay for just shy of 8 years. We lived in 2 different communities in Heron Bay. Wonderful memories, a great community. We've been out here for a little more than a year and a half in Pine Tree Estates. So the Heron Bay Golf Course, obviously it's a major issue for those that are in Heron Bay, especially people like you that live on the golf course. Out in Pine Tree, it's not a pressing issue. It's not a life-changing issue for those in Pine Tree Estates. But everyone I've spoken to in Pine Tree Estates recognizes that it's a citywide issue. And they recognize and they understand that there's going to be city resources and probably city tax dollars are going to be used in some capacity to create a solution for what's going to happen to that golf course. And I can't speak for everyone. I can only speak for the people that I have had conversations with. They support that initiative. Geographically, that golf course is on the western half of this city. It borders only Heron Bay. Why should the philosophy be any different as it relates to the Pine Tree Estates roads, that it's a citywide issue, especially when the Pine Tree roads long predate the Heron Bay Golf Course problem?
Yes?
Yeah, that was the question. Why should the Pine Tree Estates roads be treated any different than the Heron Bay Golf Course, which is a citywide issue?
So I do look at it a little bit different, and I'll tell you why. The control over what's happening with the golf course is not something that we can control now at all. Nothing has been brought forward to us. I don't see any city dollars going into the golf course. I don't know where you're getting the idea of city dollars going into the golf
If
course.
city staff is studying the golf course, that's city dollars, because those are.
City staff is not working on the golf course now. City staff is not working on the golf course. So until anything comes forward to us from the people who own the golf course, nothing is being done on the golf course right now other than the lawn being mowed on the golf course and people actively using the golf course, biking, going for walks, walking their dogs, skateboarding. Other than that, there is no active use on the golf course, and until Club Link decides what they're going to do with the property that they own, because Club Link owns the golf course and NSID owns the lakes, and NSID also owns a little bit of the land that surrounds the lakes. And we're talking about two different cities here. We have about 30% of it in Coral Springs, and the other 70% is in Parkland. And most of the areas where the land is in Parkland, there is no connection to any exterior roadways. So my assumption, and this is just an assumption, is that anything that will be done on the golf course will most likely be done closer to the south gate, where there is a lot more land and access to roads. Because anything else inside would have to be interior and would not be able to be open to the public because it is behind a gate and there is no roadway access. So I think it's a completely different situation, and it's not even something that can be addressed until it comes forward. And there are many people that are able to work on it, but the city is not able to work on the golf course now, nor can we have anything to do with the golf course until it's determined whether or not the golf course is going to be sold, or if Club Link and Moorgard are going to develop it. We don't know. So I see it as two completely different times, issues, and situations, but I am not concerned with what's happening with the golf course. And as I have said, and I'm sure some of you did hear me say, if I was concerned, I would put my house up for sale. And anybody who's unhappy in Pine Tree, I say do that now, because guess what? You're going to make a lot of money on your houses. They're selling very quickly, and there's not a lot of inventory in Parkland right now. But if I had any concern over my golf course, I would not be living here, and I would have sold my house.
So we'll veer off kind of Pine Tree issues and cover some global Parkland issues, if you don't mind. And we're actually wrapping up. We've gone way late, and you've been gracious, and people watching have been very gracious. Everyone's tired of my voice, including me.
And probably mine too.
So I know you said that you feel that it's part of your job as a commissioner to have a certain respect level for the mayor and other commissioners. And I've got a question about a recent resolution that was passed that you voted against. And it was Mayor Hunchofsky's buy local resolution. And we explained it in the last meeting.
Yes.
Essentially saying when city dollars are going to be used, that you should at least make an attempt to buy from a Parkland business first. And if that doesn't happen, fine, great, go anywhere you want. But you should at least try and buy local and support Parkland businesses. You were one of two commissioners that voted against this initiative of Mayor Hunchofsky. And no resolution is perfect. Could it have been crafted better? Sure. But everything could be crafted better. Don't you think it was a good time to at least jump on this and say, hey, it's a start and we could make it better as we go? But instead you voted no. And I'll give you an opportunity to explain why you voted against that buy local initiative.
Mm-hmm. And I would still vote against the buy local initiative. And I'll tell you why. As I have shared with you from the time that we got on the call, I believe in being there for all of the residents of Parkland. And I feel very strongly that we have businesses that are located inside of Parkland, and we have business owners that live in Parkland and their businesses are just outside of Parkland. Very ironic that the night that that vote came up, and this is very funny, I have like the lowest miles on my car that you could possibly imagine because I hate to leave Parkland. I have a business in Boca. I rarely go, not only during the pandemic, but always. I hate leaving this community because I believe it's so important for me to be in the community instead of outside the community. The night of that vote, I had recently sold my business, and my husband said to me, Stacy, you don't like to shop. I hate shopping. Probably don't believe that, but I hate shopping. I don't believe in buying things that I don't need. So I'm very conservative when it comes to that. And my husband said to me, you just sold your business. It's time for you to enjoy your life a little bit. You'll have more time to do the things that you love, like spending time focusing on the city. And he said, go buy yourself something. So I went to Parkland Jewelers that night. I'm not wearing it. And I bought a beautiful necklace that I had a diamond put in, and I was really excited about it. And I drove to the commission meeting, and I was so happy that I bought it at Parkland Jewelers. I eat in Parkland. I shop in Parkland. If I go out of Parkland, I feel guilty. But I also feel extremely strongly about protecting businesses and business owners that not only live in our city, but live in our city and have businesses outside.
But Stacy, why not support it and then add on to it later? Why not use this as a good start and say, okay, it's a Parkland business. The owner may live in Coconut Creek or Coral Springs. And I love the initiative to support business owners that live in Parkland and have businesses in other cities. But why not support this for the good that it was and work on making it better later?
I felt that it was missing too much, and I didn't feel that that night during our discussions that people were open to adding other things. And I'll give you an example. We had a breakfast, and you know, it's very hard sometimes to have people deliver. And when we have to have city staff that has to go and they have to go pick something up, sometimes they can't do it in Parkland. But let's say you have a business like Diane's Country Kitchen. Diane's a Parkland resident, and Diane's business is in Coral Springs. So should I absolutely negate the ability to have my staff use Diane's Country Kitchen and not have them use Diane's, but say, oh, no, you can only go to Parkland Bagels or you can only go to Publix? So I feel that moving the economy and feeling like we're looking out for every business owner that doesn't only have a brick and mortar here, but has a business elsewhere. And I also felt that that alienated people from coming into our community because it's saying buy local. So if I live in Coral Springs or Coconut Creek or Boca, I didn't like the message that that sent because it doesn't bring residents into our community to use Parkland local businesses. So it just didn't feel right to me.
Okay, we're winding down. Next question I have is about fostering relationship with state leadership in Tallahassee. One, do you think that that's important for a mayor, city commissioners to do so? And if so, what have you done to foster relationships? Have you been to Tallahassee? Do you have meetings in Tallahassee? Have you attended Broward Days in Tallahassee? What have you done in that regard?
So I believe that fostering relationships with other political leaders is hugely important, but I do not feel that my body physically being in Tallahassee means that I'm involved. Broward Days is a very social event, and it's a way for people who may not have the contacts and may not have the relationships that they could pick up a phone and call somebody or send an email. And just because you can go speak and opine for 3 minutes on a topic doesn't mean that you don't support the topic, doesn't mean you don't fight for the topic, doesn't mean you haven't communicated in reference to the topic. I actually went to DC when our city got an award for being an intergenerational city. And I met with our congressmen and I met with other leaders on the federal level. And I went to many events to accept an award with some of my colleagues here in Parkland. And the relationships that I fostered have stayed. The relationships that I've met with other leaders in Tallahassee have stayed. I was scheduled to go to Tallahassee during the shooting. And during the shooting, I really felt very strongly that when we had 3 of our colleagues in Tallahassee, that there needed to be people here in Parkland for the residents that were here.
So in 8 years as a commissioner, you have not been to Tallahassee one time?
Oh, no, I have not. And I do not feel that it's a necessity for my job. And I feel that my relationships that I have with my colleagues in Tallahassee are very strong. And Broward Days is a few days and it's a lot of partying. And it's very funny that you should even mention Broward Days, because I've already spoken with our lobbyists here at the city of Parkland, and I don't want to go to Broward Days. So I arranged that when I do become mayor in November, that I'm going to go to Tallahassee so I can have quiet meetings and not socialize. Because for me, I don't need to go to Tallahassee to meet with 20 of my colleagues from Coral Springs or Tamarack or Coconut Creek. I can meet with them here. And I don't need to go to Tallahassee to meet with my legislators. I can meet with them here. And I could pick up a phone. And I went to school in Tallahassee and I know Tallahassee very well, but I do not believe that that is in any way a mandatory ruling for being a mayor.
So the second to last question, and again, I keep thanking you because I know this is a difficult conversation. Look, the conversations that change things are difficult conversations, and this is a difficult conversation to have. So I do applaud you. Second to last question is, there are, in the city budget, there's roughly $2 million that's going to be used to fix almost brand new sports fields. The fields in the back of Pine Trails Park, which I believe was done while you were on the commission, have no drainage. They were built completely improperly. The material under the field wasn't done correctly. The fields weren't crowned, meaning like this, so the water rolls off. And there's a lot of wasted time that kids can't use those fields because it was constructed so poorly. And that's going to cost about $1.8 million, I think, to fix those fields, which are pretty new. The 2 multi-purpose fields over at Terramar Park, close to those of us that live on the east side, those also fairly new, I believe was done when you were on the commission. Those were actually built as to the wrong size. They're not regulation soccer fields. And there's going to be about $300,000 that are going to be used to go ahead and fix mistakes that were done on those fields. So you've got $2 million coming out of our budget to fix athletic fields that, in the history of athletic fields, those things are basically brand new. Both of those fields, I believe, were constructed when you were on the commission.
Yes.
That's $2 million Pine Tree would love to have. How did we get there? Where did we go wrong? How did the commission go wrong there? It's glaring. It's obvious. It's an enormous expenditure.
I'm very glad that you brought up that question, because I felt very strongly when we voted to increase the fields and add more fields. I'm not an engineer, and I have to count on my city staff and the engineers and the people that we hire to construct the park. We had no way of knowing prior to the park's construction that there was going to be a drainage issue.
Oh, you'll never get me to agree with that.
I'm not an engineer.
Football league. I've run an adult flag football league for 15 years. You know, before you get into a project, how the drainage is. I'm not saying you're a commissioner.
Oh, no. I would have no way of knowing that.
You know, drainage before they get into a project.
So when we voted on the fields, we voted on those fields because we had an increased population of children, and we wanted to make sure that we had enough field space. And I agree with you, the $1.8 million on the fields kind of makes me shake a little bit too. But I felt that we needed to correct the problem. And I also felt that I didn't want to spend any more money. And I don't know if you heard the last few meetings or discussions, but there was more money that wanted to be spent by some of my colleagues to start with the 32-acre park. And I thought that was extremely irresponsible. And I don't want to start constructing the 32-acre park or do any more improvements until we've resolved other issues such as drainage, such as roads, such as other things that we need to address. So it's my professional opinion, it's my opinion as a commissioner, it's my opinion as a future mayor, that what we do going forward is going to be crucial for the future of the community. I don't want to take anything away from what we voted on and what we've done, because I'm proud of the parks and I'm proud of the fields, but I also think that there are other areas where money has to be directed. And that is why strategic planning this year is going to be so incredibly crucial with where we spend that money and how we spend that money. And I don't know if any of you watched the commission meeting on Monday of last week, but 2 of us voted to go back to the rollback rate on the taxes, and 3 voted to keep the millage at 4.4 and not go back to the rollback rate. So I felt strongly that we're in the middle of a pandemic. I feel we need to be a little conservative with our money. I feel we need to sharpen our pencils. I sat with the city manager and went over the budget in detail for about 3 hours the other day. And I feel that there are areas that we need to curtail and we need to really look at in a much more serious way. And I feel that the next strategic planning session is going to be either we're going to have a commission that's going to be all about parks, or we're going to have a commission that's going to be all about our entire community. And that's something that the voters of Parkland are going to have to decide, because I am not a one-dimensional candidate. I have other people that are running for commission that look at things very differently than I do. And I feel I have to meet the needs of all of my residents, not just the residents that play on the fields. So although I do feel that we need to continue our improvements that we've made, I also feel that we need to look at everything with a sharper pencil. I think we need to look at everything with a much bigger open mind and open perspective for the future of what we have coming up. And I really feel that we need to get our community ready for after COVID and get through all of this. And I think that a lot of people's emotions are up, and I thank God that we have Eagles Haven, because Eagles Haven is something that I feel has been critical for our community's growth and development since the shooting. And even now, we have a lot more people that are under extreme stress with having children at home, with people losing their jobs, with people losing their insurance, with people concerned about their roads and their safety. And I think that with all of this going on in the world and in our community, we need to be kinder. We need to look at things from a different perspective. We need to be more open-minded with decisions that we make, and we can't be narrow-minded with the things that we look at. And that's how I feel about the budget, and that's how I feel about moving forward for next year. And I feel very strongly that I will lead the community in the right direction, and I will be extremely solution focused, and I will do everything so we come out where everybody feels like it's a win-win. And I lead with passion, and I lead with experience, and I have an array of knowledge, and I really want to take my take on the future of our city and make it everybody's future, and not have this feeling of Pine Tree being on one side and West Parkland being on the other side and the center of Parkland being here. In my opinion, we are one Parkland. And my goal is to make us not only feel like one Parkland, but to truly be one Parkland. And that's with working collectively, that's with trusting each other, that's with open communication, that's with people communicating, and that's with us working to solve problems together instead of against each other. And I'm a very positive person. I've got a very thick skin, and I'm not afraid to make tough decisions and fight for the things that I believe in.
Stacy, I thank you. I think the right word is, and some people may not understand it, I'm probably going to mispronounce it. It took a lot of chutzpah to show up and face these questions like you did. So I can explain it after the fact. So I applaud you for that. I mean it. Thank you so much for the time. Obviously, we went way over. I told you I'd give you as much time as you needed, and a lot of the people held on for that. So best of luck to you.
Thank you, Todd.
I'm going to be positive, like you've been positive about you winning. Don't forget us on November 4th. Okay?
I will not.
Because we'll be
I
here.
will not. I
We
will
will be
not
here.
forget you.
And in 2 years, we will still be here.
So will I.
Don't forget that. And
So will
again,
I.
I thank you. I really do.
Thank you.
I apologize. My wife told me I was screaming and she came in
No,
and
you weren't.
I said I wasn't. I'm just passionate about the subject. But I thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. And I'm with you. Let's
Thank
make
you.
Parkland a great city. All the parts, you know,
Thank
the
you
east,
so
the
much.
west, north, all the parts of Parkland should be a great city. So thank you. Thank you, everyone else. I'm done. This is
Thank you. Can I say one more thing? One more?
Yes.
I just want to let everybody know, I really believe in giving back, and I really believe in our community, and I really believe in the people of our community. And I am very approachable, and I'm going to give everybody my phone number. I've done it before. I am not taking any calls tonight. I'm letting you know right now. However, if anybody would like to speak with me or reach out to me, my cell number is 954-288-5261. And Todd has my number. You have my email. And if you have any questions relating to anything in the city, I'm happy to answer them. And I thank everybody for your time. And I really hope that you're all well and healthy, and know that I'm here for all of the residents, all 10,000 plus kids that we have, all of our residents and our entire community. And I will not kick the can down the road, and I will have my boots on the ground. So thank you all.
Marjorie, again, thank you. Amanda, thank you. Sherry, everybody that passed out flyers. I think we're done with forums. I spoke to the District 2 guys, and they're going to do like meet and greets. So they're yeah, I think we're done with forums. We've covered all the votes other than District 2. And both of those guys have preferred to say they'll do like a meet and greet somewhere in Pine Tree. So again, thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night, everyone.
And don't forget to vote. Single most important vote for Pine Tree.
Thank you.
And thank you. And I really appreciate everybody's time. Thank you, Todd.
Likewise. Thank you.